Hey guys, I'm Brad Hay. I've overcome some pretty serious obstacles in my life. I'm really interested to know how you handle challenges and obstacles in your life. Are you someone that'll just sit back, waiting for a savior, waiting for the world to change around you? Or are you someone that'll sit up and take responsibility for your own life and your own actions? Our world is in dire need of radical transformation, and that begins with each of us. The world is in need of inner revolution. Have you begun on your path yet? Hi, I'm Brad Hay. I've spent many years now dedicating my life to really optimizing the way I move through the world. In my mid-20s, I really hit a bottom point in my life where things were getting out of control. I was really living an underworld of drugs and alcohol and nightclubs and playing music, and it was really leading me into a spiral downward. And at that point, I was introduced to a rehabilitation program where I was more than willing to get through. At that stage in life, I was really at a point where I had to make a decision for myself to turn things around. Otherwise, it was going to be a life or death situation. So I was introduced to someone that took me into rehabilitation, which was probably the most intensive program I could have found in the country. And it was a 90-day program. I was 26 years old. I had had enough suffering. I really wanted to now dedicate my life to turning it into this positive trajectory. So 1999, entered the rehab, and in there I did extensive counseling, therapies, where it uncovered and exposed all of these things that had really led me to that point that I hadn't understood before in my life. It gave me a clear picture of what led me down this destructive path, and we started looking at what caused these behaviors. So at that point, I felt I was absolutely in the right place and on the right path. And through that process, this was quite a spiritual program where we had daily meditation practices, daily yoga practices, daily therapies, group classes, and so forth. It really helped me understand what was happening in my life and what I was doing and what I was responsible for that led me into this situation and dark sort of way of living. These dark forces that had really overcome me over the years, that accumulated, had really overtaken what I was doing. So it was quite an enlightening experience to have these inner conflicts exposed and be able to see them and see what was really causing me the struggles. So in rehab was actually where I met my first yoga teacher. And I'd practiced before. I'd studied martial arts for many years, and I was accustomed to deep stretching and deep breathing already, but I didn't have a big structured program that was going to carry me through life with a whole bunch of different processes and things that could really help guide me on the path of moving back towards soul living. So I was introduced to the deeper teachings of yoga at that point. This teacher, she was in there through her own struggles, but she had taught me some of the more in-depth things that the yoga system had to offer. And it just grabbed me. It spoke to my heart, and it was something that landed so clearly into my system that it was quite apparent that was what the path I was going to follow. So in that year, I went through the rehabilitation program and came out, and I was really dedicated. I was really determined to heal. I'd seen too many people in this loop of healing, coming back out into the world and falling back into the old patterns and the old ways of living. And I was not going to be one of those persons. I was going to be the 1 in 100 people that actually was a success coming through rehab. So at that point, I dedicated my life. It was very apparent that I was going to turn my life around. I was going to do whatever it took to turn my life around. And I had to pull out and access the inner warrior in order to overcome this darkness that had really taken over my life. So at that point, it was instrumental to where I got to in this stage. This system, I started practicing and learning some of the more refined techniques within these ancient traditions, the breathing techniques, the meditation, and it started having an effect on my life that was beyond just feeling good physically. It started helping me reprogram my mind into new ways of thinking and new ways of being in the world. Now, first of all, I had to learn the ways of thinking that were actually creating the suffering first. When I became aware of those and then learned the tools through the yoga system, I was then able to start putting these tools into practical action, combined with my self-will and dedication and relentless commitment to wanting to be well and thrive in the world. And this system kept delivering. The more I studied, the more I practiced, the more this system started opening up new teachings. So I knew I was on the right path. I spent 2 years in America after the rehabilitation program, kind of recalibrating myself in the world, finding out who I was without being in these crazy lifestyles I was living beforehand, and took a few years to really just land back in the world as the new version of myself. And as that was happening, I met another teacher in Seattle, actually, who had seen me stretching in the park. And he saw this quite built, warrior-looking guy in the park doing the front splits, and he came over and approached me and invited me back to his yoga studio that he owned. And he saw that I had quite a deep practice already, and he started encouraging me to continue my studies. And he really introduced me to the idea of becoming a teacher, a yoga teacher, a teacher in this tradition. And that really landed in a place in me that I felt quite inspired by. It was then that I was really started looking at this as something that I could have as a guiding force in my life, and also something and some way in which I could be of service to humanity. This is when I started to see that this system could both help me and I could utilize these ancient systems to help other people. So it seemed like a win-win situation. So at that point, I started gearing myself towards wanting to study a whole lot more. And as I do things in extremes, it's my nature, I looked for the most intensive yoga training I could find in the planet. And it just so happened that that was at that point in 2002, 2003, that training was here in Byron Bay in Australia. It was a 9-month tantric hatha yoga training infused with ayurveda. It was with the country's leading teachers, and it seemed perfect for what I was looking for. It was a transformative period of time. 9 months is like a whole rebirthing period, which is how this course was structured. And that was with Yoga Arts Australia. So I committed to this course. I was very committed to the systems and to discovering more about myself and learning more about these ancient arts. So in 2003, I moved back to Australia and invested myself in this program. Intensive 9-month program of daily meditation. We would start at 5:45 a.m. We would be doing pranayama for 45 minutes. We would be meditating 45 minutes and then practicing asana for a couple of hours after that. And we did this intensively with many layers. Ayurveda was introduced to me at another level during this training, which was another system that started speaking to me quite a lot more around that time. So this was instrumental. This course was really what set me off onto making this more than my lifestyle. It was now going to be my lifestyle and my purpose. My dharma is what we call that in Sanskrit. Through my own experience with these teachings, it was a number of years of really flailing around a little bit, experiencing what the actual practices did. You know, I first initially began with, like most people do, the practices of hatha yoga. We go in and we move our bodies and we maybe do some breathing work in a class and we feel different. We feel differently. Something has shifted. And so that's intrigued us enough to keep going back and wanting more. So for me personally, I started feeling more grounded and still in my mind. That's what I initially noticed was, wow, these practices are creating a level of stillness that allow me to focus on one thing at a time and to reduce the amount of fluctuations and kind of shifting movements in our mind that we all have. We all have sort of busy minds to a good degree these days. There's so much stimulation coming at us. What I initially learned was how to spend a little bit of time in a quiet space, quietening down all this busyness that's in my mind and all this clutter that we're bombarded with, and start listening to that quiet voice of our soul that's always whispering to us. It's always whispering our guidance at a deeper level from our heart. Most of the time there's too much noise in our sort of outer mind and our sensory system to even know that's there. So what initially I started noticing through, after doing the physical practices, when they're designed in a certain way, or when they're taught in a way that's a masterful sort of sequence that leads you to a place where at the end of it you can sit up and do some more refined practices of breathing, which start affecting your nervous system, which then start having an effect on your mind. Then we can sit up and go into the practices of meditation, which are more refined again. What I started experiencing was a clarity that wasn't there before, and a stillness in my mind after doing the physical practices. Especially when I learned how they were to be optimized so that you could sit up and be still. Because not all practices do that. Some can actually aggravate you and make you more anxious than when you started them. So really what it gave me a glimpse of was how to get in touch with the voice of my soul. Start listening to what my soul's desires were. And I started experiencing that myself, and it started informing my decisions in life. So what I was practicing on my mat or in my altar, I could see how they were starting to shape my life. I could go in also in meditation and reprogram these patterns of thought that were creating all the turmoil and suffering in my life. I could go in, there was enough stillness that I could go into my mind and see a thought process and see how it wasn't helpful anymore. I could look at it and go, wow, that process was definitely leading me to those actions and that way of thinking, and a spiraling sort of downward destructive course of events. Or I can twist it at the thought and shift my perspective of the situation, change the thought, and that will change how I act in the world. So this was initially what I started seeing beyond just feeling better and more energy in the body. I saw how it was affecting my mind, because that's ultimately where all our distortions are made up. They're all made up in the mind, and we distort the soul's desires in our mind and turn them into something else. The role of yoga is to really still, if you see your mind as a lens, it's to clear that lens so the light of your soul is shining through. That will inform your life. So that's what I started experiencing personally. And then over years of repetition, I saw it actually accumulating. So that when I wasn't practicing during the day, I could experience myself in these thought processes of what I would go through in meditation, which is maybe more a contemplative part of meditation where you are thinking about things and reprogramming. And I could pull them out at any time in the day and be aware of, I would take a deep breath and think to myself, if I make that decision, it's going to lead me that way. Or if I make this decision that I'm hearing from my quieter voice, it's going to lead me that way. And I started doing this and choosing the way that was leading me to what I knew in my heart was wholesome and more supportive to being in my purpose, and more supportive and aligned with the nature of things in the universe. I started feeling that every time I listened to that voice, it strengthened it. And it weakened the other voice that was sort of this magnetic dark force that would pull me into my old behaviors. It was weakening every time I strengthened and pointed my perspective at this light path. And in a nutshell, that's kind of what yoga is. It's like pointing your perspective to the voice of your soul, as opposed to the voice of the external mind that's constantly wanting to take things in and find energy and find identity from external sources, not from in here. So at the end of 2003, I completed this intensive 9-month training, which was life-changing, transformational. It had really swung things around for me. At the end of that training, I remained in Australia for around about 9 months, and I had this pulling back to the mountains in the US. So I moved back to the USA in 2004, and I met my first wife, and we were married. I lived in Colorado, and it wasn't long after that I opened my first small little yoga school in this little mountain town, called it Shiva Yoga. And I began teaching. I had quite an array of different students in that time. I had a lot of extreme sports people. I had a few actually Olympic athletes that were students and practicing in my studio. So it was quite an interesting period of time of starting to really ramp up my level of teaching and the way I was to meet and help people in the world. So that was in around about 2005 in Colorado, and I was at the same time looking for a teacher that was going to be carrying me on from where I'd left off in this 9-month training. I really wanted to find a teacher that was steeped in tradition and also very in the world, because that's what I desired in life, was to have a family and a business and be in the world. I wasn't ready to renounce my life, at this point. So through searching through the great wide world web, I found Yoga Rupa Rod Stryker, who I'd heard of before. He was kind of one of the leading forces of Tantra in the USA. And I saw that he was doing a training in a little school hall over the mountain from me in Colorado in a few months from when I actually found his name. And so I drove over to this school, and it was a little schoolhouse out near where he lived, and there was 30 other people there, and we went to study the 5 days on the Yoga Sutra. And right away, Rod and I had sort of met, and we were both men in the yoga system, which we are the minority. There's probably about 5% men, 90% women. So we already had this connection of masculine figures, but in this system that was to be, life-changing, transformational system. So we already connected greatly right there. And then after the training, it was very apparent that this was going to be the tradition that I was going to dedicate my life and practice to. And this was going to be the teacher that I know I could study for many years with. And so I did. I committed. I spent 15 years practicing and learning a great deal, an exceptional amount about the tradition, about the teachings themselves, many different life lessons along the way as well through practicing with Rod. And I became one of the leading level 3 teachers in the organization over many years. And this became a big part of what I offered in the world. So it was sort of a pinnacle where I was practicing even deeper and deeper. And what it was uncovering was some dissatisfaction in my life. And around 2009, my marriage dissolved. I left the marriage. I wanted to pursue a different path in life. And so in order to do that, I left the marriage and moved out to California. And I wanted to utilize that opportunity to study Ayurveda at a deeper level. This is when I also found out that the yoga system in Ayurveda is scientific. It's not just randomly do some practices and hope for the best, which is, I believe, what most of the world does a lot of the time. What I learned through learning these traditional teachings was there is a systematic approach. There's a general systematic approach, and then there's a very individualized approach for each person. We've got to find out what we call in Sanskrit is Svat Tantra, but what's the system and the path that's going to work specifically for me? Because we're all very individualized in how our bodies are made up, and we've all got individualized experiences of what we've had in life and conditioning. So we need a unique set of practices and programming. So when we learn the principles and the fundamental ideas of how these techniques and practices work, we can apply them specifically to our needs. And this is really what I emphasize in what I offer in my teachings is, let's learn what this system has to offer, because there are tools to still your mind, there are tools to expand your mind, there's tools to ground your energy, there's tools to build your energy. And, different purposes for different things. So right at that time, I moved out to California and moved up to Nevada City in Northern California, and started the program at one of the leading schools in the US for sure, maybe one of the leading schools in the world on Ayurvedic medicine. So I began that program in 2010. It took me 2.5 years to finish the program. And one of the other gifts through doing that program is I met my current wife in Northern California, and who I'm currently still with and very happily married. And after this Ayurvedic course, I started practicing clinical Ayurveda. I had a clinic in Denver, Colorado. We'd moved out to Denver at that point, and started seeing clients on a daily basis, So it was my introduction. It wasn't ultimately where I wanted to take the Ayurveda, but it was a great way of learning. I spent years seeing hundreds and hundreds of clients and working with them progressively to help them through this process of first uncovering these inner imbalances or inner programs that were creating disharmony in their life, and then working with ways progressively to overcome them. So this was really great to be in the field and practice Ayurveda at that level. So I got a great understanding and experience around how we can actually utilize these systems in that degree, working one-on-one with people to really change their lives. And I saw such incredible results. Even just through the most basic things that people were changing in their lives, they were lighting up. Their lights were coming back on. They were starting to feel more aligned with their inner nature. They were starting to see and be more inspired about finding out what they wanted to do in life, and it was quite rewarding. And so where that led me was really ultimately to what I specialize in now, is the integration of Ayurvedic medicine and the Ayurvedic principles, and infusing them as the base or the foundational teachings to all of yoga and tantra. And that's what's formulated the programs that I teach today. So that was the beginning of that, after these extensive studies and experience through being an Ayurvedic practitioner, that led me to opening quite a big school in Colorado, in Denver. And it was to be a traditional school. There was many other schools and vinyasa-based schools and so forth, but there was very few schools that really honored tradition and wanted to honor these traditional teachings with Ayurveda as the base in them, and the traditional teachings of Tantra and classical yoga. So that was in 2014, and then it wasn't long after that my wife and I were pregnant with our child. So she was born in 2015, which became another quite significant turning point in my life. It really made me assess how I was living life, and also, as any parents would understand, it made me really have to refine what I was putting my time and energy into, And it also became a big part of my purpose. I knew my purpose was to share these powerful ancient teachings, definitely my purpose, but now also my purpose was to be a father, to be a great father, what I wanted to be. So it really shifted my focus to really refining how I was living again in the world. And I wanted to really integrate what I was learning through being a parent or the teachings, what I was learning through these teachings, into parenting. And so that began to happen in 2015, and it wasn't long after that I realized owning a studio wasn't really what I wanted to focus on. There was too much time spent managing a studio and managing teachers, whereas my purpose was in teaching and offering the teachings. So I sold the studio, and we moved to Hawaii ultimately. I wanted to also get back to having more joy in my life around doing the things I love doing, and being in the ocean was one of them. So at that time, we had decided we wanted to bring our daughter up in that environment, and I also wanted my soul was screaming for the ocean, and it had been years in the mountains. So we're just following our heart's desires, and it led us to Hawaii for a couple of years, where we were going to open a big retreat center. But through different events, through following your heart, sometimes things don't always plan out how your mind had sort of perceived that they were. But this ultimately led us to moving to Bali, where I was teaching these specialty teachings full-time in a renowned center in Bali, and which reconnected me back with Australia. It reconnected me back with my home country in 2018, I guess it was, 2017 or 18. And so we decided to move our family back to Australia and set up camp here again, where we'd like to bring up our daughter. And ultimately, for me, it was a full circle experience of leaving Australia, going to study and find some of the greatest teachers I could find on the planet in these systems. And I spent 18 years in the US studying in depth, practicing in depth, and accumulating experiences in divorce and marriage. And ultimately it led me back to Australia, where I came back with a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge and wisdom. And since then, I've really formulated both a 200 and a 300-hour training program that systematically ties these three systems of Ayurveda, classical yoga and Tantra into a complete integrated system. So now that's really what I dedicate my life towards, is making it easier for others, really. I've spent years pulling a lot of experience and teachings together, and now I've mapped them out in a way that can save people time and effort and find transformation, help people uncover their purpose a lot more quickly and efficiently. So that now has become really my main focus and my purpose in the world. And so now ultimately what I've seen in my own life is this progression. It wasn't, there were aha moments, but there was more of a progression of awareness building and things slowly changing in my life that have kept this consistent sort of uphill flow, if you like to look at it like that. It wasn't like when all of a sudden I was enlightened and everything went to beautiful colors. It's sort of a bit of a romanticized idea of what these teachings do. Instead, if I reflect back, I just see how much more stable I've been in life, how more sound my decisions are now every day, how much more I can maintain a steady emotional state. And if I do get into states where there's turbulence, and we all do, life presents many situations that are going to create challenges for us, I'm much more skillfully able to ride through these challenges. Yes, I feel emotions, sometimes intensely. I don't react from them as much anymore. I respond to them, I can feel them and stay grounded, and then still make a relatively wise decision and move forth, even amidst these intense emotions. So I can see that as even that tool alone is going to be life-changing for most people, is to be able to stay grounded, stay calm and steady, even whilst feeling intense emotions, and keep your keep your focus of what you aspire to in life. We really need that. That's what we need in life. I mean, there's so many obstacles, there's so many challenges in our current day that I think it's never been more relevant than our modern times to utilize these ancient arts. So the way I've set up these courses and the way these teachings flow through these courses is although it's called a teacher training, these courses are self-development courses. They're for anyone wanting to thrive more at what they do in life. So you don't even have to want to be a yoga teacher at all to do these trainings and to benefit from the wisdom and the knowledge and the principles that are in there. They can apply to anything in your life. So absolutely, these trainings for everyone that wants to improve their experience of life, to experience more joy, more prosperity, more fulfilling life. Really, that's the number one goal. Even as I am approaching them as teacher trainings, that's my number one goal always, is for people to be an embodiment of the teachings first. And that's essentially where you begin to heal at a deep level. Once you find this deep level exposure, your inner healing becomes a very apparent part of your life. When this healing begins, we start to feel and be informed by our soul. And what our soul will tell us is really what our desires are, and it tells us what our purpose is at a soul level. This leads to deeper fulfillment in life. When we get out of these patterns that are keeping us in these jobs and things that we do, relationships that are not serving us, causing us so much suffering, this is when we can actually begin to find our purpose in life and follow it. The idea is building a stable foundation. So we build a stable foundation through practices and lifestyles that cultivate this inner stability first. And once we've got this foundation of inner stability, a little bit of stability in the mind, the body is robust, and we've built our energy, we can start building more of this force of energy, or prana, we call it, and also this other light force energy that's the essence of fire, which is really at the essence of these teachings, is called tejas, this inner light. So once we've built the stability, we can now start to build the energy and light that we need to move through life with more wisdom. Without the container of this light in life, we're not going to be able to hold it so well. I think it's one of the most heartwarming parts of my work is to actually see students' lights come on. When we're in the middle of a lecture or presenting something, I see something happen in their eyes and their mind, that their perspective has shifted. and they've had an aha moment. And even if it's one small one that might improve their life by 5%, that's huge to how you will experience life. So I see people understanding. This is one of the things that I really, I believe in strongly, and what I portray in my teachings is when people understand how they operate and how the world operates, they can then make the changes. If they don't understand, then it's really difficult. So a big part of seeing them with the understanding part first is very crucial. When I see their mind going down a path and understanding the processes that go on in their mind, and creates emotion, and that leads us to acting a certain way. So that's one of the really rewarding things that I've seen over the years, is people actually starting to understand what this system has to offer and understand why we're in turmoil, why we're in a conflict. And then over working with, because I have many students now that have come to these teachings and stayed with me for many years. So the progress I've seen in these students is I see them go from working in jobs that they've despised to creating a new life, whether it's teaching yoga or not. They've gone from this career path that was really beating down on their soul and making them unhappy to exposing what they wanted to do in life and starting to pursue it. So they've become more powerful than their negative patterns. And this is also part of the teachings, is we want to become more powerful than those negative kind of patterns that we feel stuck in, you know? And seeing people go from feeling stuck at I have to stay at this job, I have to stay in this marriage, to I'm going to activate the inner warrior and make the changes I want to see in the world. I'm going to make the changes that I want myself to experience rather than waiting for them to happen. We know that's not going to work out. Right? Hopefully we've had enough experience to know that nothing's going to come around your house and change your life for you. I'm responsible for that. You're responsible for yours. Seeing people take responsibility, be accountable for their own transformation is one of the most rewarding things I've seen. And it's something we really infuse in the teachings, is this, I am accountable. And I see my role as a teacher, and I don't take it lightly, but I'm not the guru, I'm not the transformer. The teachings are. I point to them. Here they are. Use them to transform your life. And when they take them and go, and my role here is to deliver them in a way that people can understand and digest, for one. Make them practical, not technical and complicated. They've got to be practical and accessible. So I believe that's what I've done quite well over the years, is digest these teachings into a package that people can see it and understand it and start to utilize it. Students become more grounded, they become more steady, they become stronger in their own world, they cultivate more inner strength, they start being in control of their thoughts and decisions. They're able to ride out turbulence in the world with much more grace and ease. We're not perfect, we still have our topples, but to see people improve has been incredibly rewarding for me. And I've seen it, and this is why people keep coming back to study these teachings, is they work. And I see the ones that stay dedicated and stay on and keep going and keep doing it are the ones that progress most in the world too. It's not a weekend workshop's not going to cut it. It's great. You can learn a lot. You can expose you to what the teachings have to offer. But when you commit your life to self-developing and really embracing what these teachings have to offer, that's when you'll see and feel the transformation. All right, well done, guys. You made it through the entire video, already showing some commitment to your own process. If you resonate with the idea of being able to powerfully transform your own life, then subscribe to my channel with heaps more videos coming up, free content about the Vedic arts, teachings of Tantra, Ayurveda, and yoga. Also, remember to hit the notifications bell so you're notified when there's new free content coming out. You can leave comments or questions in the comment bar, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, guys. Thanks for watching.